was the home of Greta Thunberg and all those, people who should have spent
Careful.
more time in school and learning about the world rather than demonstrating. It was also the home of flight shaming here 5 years ago. And here you have the Swedes leading the charge, abolishing taxes. And, we have our glorious leaders down the street today meeting, discussing, how we make Europe more competitive. The Swedish government, the Italian government are now calling for the suspension of ETS, even more radical than A4E. And so I think the future is bright, but only when Europe gets more competitive, and the way to get Europe more competitive is to bring ETS in line with Corsia. You want to be very competitive, abolish the bloody thing altogether.
Carsten, discussion over, let's go home.
Let's go to Sweden.
All being said.
I mean, do you feel that there is a changed environment in this city?
I clearly do feel this, also in the capital of Germany, in Berlin. That doesn't mean that things change tomorrow. But I think for 20 years, I've only been seeing things going one way, decreasing competitiveness of Europe, or in my case of Germany. And now people starting to understand that they have reached the limits, obviously Sweden being ahead. I think we will look at those years, mid-20s, one day as a turning point. I'm quite convinced. Never as fast as we wanted, never as extreme as we wanted, we all know that. But people have understood being not connected anymore. For example, in our case, certain parts of Germany, we talked about Asia already. I'm pretty sure we'll see that at a turning point one day.
Right, but what's driven it? Is it, they didn't suddenly wake up one morning and the scales fell from their eyes and they saw the light. This is necessity? Is it desperation?
Well, let's talk on behalf of the industry. Fortunate enough, it was not companies failing, which could also have been a wake-up call. In some industries, politicians wake up when companies fail, go bankrupt, people become jobless. That in our industry didn't happen. I think in our case, it was loss of connectivity of certain parts, for sure, in Europe, Germany, or now this thing I think will be a wake-up call for the connectivity of Asia to Europe.
Kenton, the UK hasn't quite got there yet. APD is still absolutely cornerstone and seemingly not going to change except to go up.
Yeah, to be fair, in the UK it was frozen for a couple of years. And during the years that domestic APD came down, we grew our capacity and we put more connectivity in, and that investment came through those lower years. Now we're just starting to have it put back, and it's going to increase by RPI, and I think that will start having an impact, and that will start affecting connectivity. And we see it outside the UK as well. Amsterdam Schiphol will be a perfect example. Those airport fees, and Ben knows this more than I do, but the airport fees are incredibly high. The taxation is incredibly high. And although we're maintaining our 9 aircraft there at the moment, we're flying further distances, which means we're having less connectivity and flying fewer frequencies on some of the flights.
When you talk to the authorities there, what do they say, Ben?
Well, I think there's a complete misunderstanding or misalignment of what the impact of the decisions have on the connectivity of the Netherlands. The net law.
Do they care?
I think they care, but when you have 3 or 4 different bodies that make decisions, and the whole is negative for the Netherlands. As an example, so the airport. Amsterdam, as far as I know, is the only major airport in Europe that is requiring airlines to pay for all their losses during COVID. So airlines basically recapitalize its airport. After COVID, we are now paying some of the highest fees. There have been increases like we've never seen, 26% margin at Schiphol, all paid back to the government in dividends. We have an airport that can't make up its mind how many slots are going to be available. So for an airline like ours to be based there is, it's not a way to operate.
How much leverage how much leverage are you prepared to use to transfer traffic, flights, aircraft out of Schiphol to, now you've got a northern base up in Copenhagen, you've got other bases, just basically say, you're not going to give us, we'll move elsewhere.
Well, I mean, it's not really leverage. We're going to be forced to do it anyways. If we don't have the profits out of KLM, we can't justify the capex, and we'll move them to other, new airplanes or even existing airplanes to other bases. I mean, it's just normal math.
Right, but I guess the difference is between the normal maths and saying it in words of one syllable that make the evening news so that the politicians realise that's what you're doing. There's a big difference between the two.
Look, we're not growing. Everyone around us is growing, in particular the Gulf carriers. So what I think...
Why are you pointing at him?
No, no. I think today, just going back to today's issue, is how this impacts KLM, how it impacts Lufthansa, Air France, British Airways, everybody. It's a big wake-up call for Europe when you have 100 wide bodies that come out of Europe immediately, and the dependence on the Gulf for connectivity going eastbound. So on top of everything you just brought up, we've been faced for many, many years with an unlevel playing field, with ETS, with SAF, where we have no level playing field. We haven't been able to put in a carbon, haven't been able to put in a mechanism to equalize it. Very, very frustrating for us. And what you can see here is in Europe, you cannot get to Asia or to Southeast Asia, many destinations, without going via the Gulf. And today you can't go via the Gulf.
So there is this moment now where you can make progress because the evidence is very clear to see. Are you confident that you can do it?
No, I think you asked before that if we see a different mood in Europe, and I think that we see a different mood, but it's not, to be honest, because all the messages that we have repeated for 10 years is more because Europe has realized that, or we changed the strategy for energy, security, consolidation, environment, or we are irrelevant in this world. So we see a different mood, but when we talk, for example, about competition and other carriers, I think we need to look inside what we can do to be more competitive ourselves, not to try to contaminate the others. Because if the others are more efficient, what we have to do is to be more efficient. But
what does that mean, though, to be more efficient? You've been increasing efficiency as best you can over decades.
Yeah, but the problem, we saw this morning a graph where the evolution in number of passengers and the evolution in cost that we are paying today, because now you need to pay for SAF, ETS, we were talking before about APD. APD is an environmental tax that doesn't go to environment. ETS is an environmental system that doesn't go to the production of SAF, and we are paying for all that. So at the end we are not competitive, and that's the reason we cannot add more flights to other destinations.
Carsten, this inflection point, that we might be at.
Inshallah.
It will only work if collectively you push the point. It will, otherwise, the risk here for you all, frankly, is that, please God, the war ends quickly, but that things get back to normal relatively soon, and everybody forgets what it was all about. You first, and then Kenton.
In my view, we shouldn't overestimate the war in this regard. First of all, there's people dying there. This is a disaster, at least for the region, maybe for the world. We shouldn't be winning in the war because of a war. But it adds to this moment of waking up. That's rather my message, that this war has accelerated people to understand that we have gone the wrong direction. The war itself, capacity will come back. One day people will forget and have their vacation there. That's all good. But I think it helped to wake up regulators, the media, politicians, maybe even voters in Europe, that this is going the wrong way. That, I think, was supported by the events of the last 4 weeks or 3 weeks.
Do you think that collectively you need to remind voters of this?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, if you go back a couple of years, you had Greens in power across most European governments. You had a big Green rump in the European Parliament. They've largely lost a lot of those recent elections. The Greens have been voted out of office. And I think the timing of the war, while unfortunate, doesn't take away from the fact that the Swedes are abolishing aviation tax, the Slovakians are abolishing aviation tax, the Italian government, who are abolishing aviation taxes, are also calling for the rollback of ETS. There is a fundamental change in the attitude of European governments. We know today, for example, the Greek government and the Spanish government are furious with the way ETS incentivises travel to competing Morocco or Turkey and penalises Greece and Spain. This is a fundamental change at government level. Now, will it translate to action here in Europe? God help us all, who knows? They're all talking down the road all day today, but there is a real demand among major European governments that we've got to push back on these environmental taxes, which are penalising Europeans and making us less competitive. Von der Leyen will run around for the next 9 months nodding on about the need to be competitive, while she does absolutely nothing about it. But European governments, I mean, most of the European governments 6 months ago wrote to the Commission, signed letter, signed by all the Prime. What are you doing about competitiveness? We've seen no action on the Draghi report, no action on the letter report. We want action.
So we have a rule on Quest Means Business. Every time somebody says the Draghi report, we have to take a drink. Well, because everybody says it, don't they? If I had $1 or £1 or €1 for every time someone said the Draghi report, then I would be a very wealthy man. And yet when I ask, what have you actually done about it? They don't really, well, it's in the 3rd committee of the 4th council of the 2nd directorate, which is due to report for the umpteenth time. That's the problem with competitiveness. It's great to talk about and very difficult to do.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we should remember that we have an amazingly competitive industry. You know, the European aviation industry is probably the most competitive globally, but I think the risk, as everyone stated, is the more regulation we put on, the more expense we put into the system, then we endanger the competitive nature of it. I think it's seen in some times with the long-haul carriers where people are moved to non-EU hubs and that becomes more affordable. But we'll see it also in Europe. And we need to, things like the Gulf War crisis shows that we should want to be not so addicted to carbon fossil fuel. But we have completely failed so far to make a functioning SAF market. And that is a problem going forward.
At what point is the SAF mandate going to collapse under its own weight of incompetence?
So I think the ESAF is collapsing, and that's the reason today we are asking for a delay, because there is no ESAF, and we don't see that in 4 or 5 years we are going to have more. And we still have the doubt about the SAF, because it's true that you can have SAF to comply with the mandate today, very expensive, but as soon as the SAF mandate is going to increase, we need to see we are going to have SAF at an affordable price. So maybe the system is going to collapse.
Right, well, assuming that, Michael, I'm taking my life in my hands here. Michael, assuming that they're not all idiots up the road.
I don't think we can assume that, Richard. That's not.
I gave you that one. That was a cheap shot, but there you go. Assuming they're all idiots, they must see the same statistics that you do. And they must also realise that the whole SAF thing is not... I mean, they can tax you and they can fine you up the wazoo for not meeting it, and they can fine the producers and everybody until their cows come home. But if you can't make the mandate, you can't make the mandate.
And Europe will do what Europe always does. They will move the mandate to the right, but probably not until 28 or 29. We're all in a state of denial at the moment. The mandate is going to get moved for both ESAF and SAF. It is going to move from 2030 to the mid-2030s. I don't think we should abandon the SAF mandates, but there has to be some credibility about its production. And at the moment, there is no possibility of 6% being delivered by 2030. So it will get moved to the right.
Carsten, when you look at the competitiveness question, for you, what's the one change you want to see?
Well, I think for us it's obvious. We want a level playing field as much as possible. Let's be honest, it's impossible with Gulf carriers, but at least we don't want any extra burden to make it even less a level playing field. So let's take for granted that there is different labor costs in the Gulf or whatever it is outside of Europe. But at least then there shouldn't be additional ETS, additional SAF on top. So
do you think there needs to be a rolling back of some of the agreements, the Open Skies agreements, say with Qatar, some of the agreements that have been put in place that...
Now, we should be realistic. I think the one with Qatar, of course, there's this corruption case. There probably the legal system one day will stop it, I think. But the others are there, and I think that they will not be rewinded. But it's not the bilateral agreements alone. It's the fact that we have additional burdens, which makes it even less possible to have a level playing field. And these, as I think it was Louis who said it today, these are in the hands of this continent. Here we can change ETS. Here we can change and move self-mandates. We don't even need to leave Europe for that. So let's do the things which are in our hands to not further increase the level playing field disadvantage.
Why do you think, Kenton, this is one of the questions I've never really understood. Why do you think aviation doesn't get that message fully across, or at least the politicians don't fully appreciate it? I mean, 10 years of A4E has been very, very vocal at getting that message across.
You didn't ask me, but I have a view.
Oh.
But there's a lot, right? Now, if I look at other industries in Europe who have a problem, it's the industry, it's the player in the industry who has a problem. I come from a part of Germany where the steel industry was big. Eventually, steel companies went bankrupt, people lost their jobs. Us, as the stakeholder called Airlines, we don't do so badly. I mean, we make between 5 and 15% margins. All of us hire every year, we grow. It's not that we attract the pittiness of this, it's our customers in Europe, which is the stakeholder which is losing. And that's a little different than from other industries, I think.
I think that's part of it, because we have a successful aviation industry here in Europe, and we've done well despite the work of the European Parliament. But also, you know, when you think about the fact that SAFs have been a bit off in the distance, I think this will come. I mean, the ESAF is just becoming a fact. You know, right now it's almost inevitable that we have less than 1% by 2030 of what's mandated. And I think if it moves into the lose-lose scenario of fining oil majors billions in fines, they will naturally push it through to margins. To the airlines margins are too thin, it goes to the consumer, and then you're not decarbonising, and you're even more uncompetitive. And I think then messages land.
I think the problem is that we want to have a popular regulation, not regulation that address the problems. So if you have a problem with CO2 emissions and you want to decarbonize aviation, produce SAF. It's not a question of putting penalties to the airlines that we don't have SAF to put on the aircraft. Produce SAF, and then you solve the problem, because it's the only solution in the short and medium term. Passenger rights, for example.
Yes.
We want to increase the passenger rights, but the problem is not that. The problem is that 90% of the flights are delayed because of ATC in Europe. Fix ATC, and then you don't have delays. It's not a problem of the regulation how you compensate the customer. Fix ATC.
But we've got a really good one coming up now, haven't we? The baggage. What's wrong with allowing people by law to take a bag on board, Michael?
Nothing. It's the second bag. There's a couple of fundamental points here. It doesn't fit.
We're talking about
There's no room on
You've got your personal you've got your personal thing, and you've got a carry-on.
We already protect your personal thing. It's guaranteed. Everybody brings a free bag on board, even a Ryanair flight.
Wallet.
It's the second bag that doesn't fit. It won't fit on a fully packed 737. It won't fit on a turboprop feeder aircraft. Now, I know this is a minor detail to European parliamentarians, there is no demand from my passengers for ever be bringing a second bag on board. So I don't know who they're supposedly addressing.
Oh, but it's very popular.
It isn't very popular. I have 208 million passengers who say it's not very popular. There's no MEP got elected with more than about 50,000 bloody votes. As usual, the MEPs are distracted away from fixing the real problem, which is 90% of the flight delays are caused by ATC. Don't, Cynthia, go there because you're going to get murdered here. Trust me.
Shall we let her have a go?
Go on.
I'll do the duty. Oh God, what have we opened? What have we
defend the MEPs?
I got 100,000 votes as a first-time comer to politics in Ireland South, and I got elected 2 years ago. And the reason I got that amount of votes is because I talked as much sense, not bullshit, sense, as Michael O'Leary, and the voters actually realised that I was prepared to do something, not just to...
Oh, screw you, do you mind not doing a political speech?
I'm sorry, the MEPs...
Oh, here we go.
Not just me, we do care about the bags. I understand the bag issue. I don't particularly want a second bag because you know why, Michael? It delays us all taking off to try and get to do our business. You're quite right. Bring your handbag and put everything into it.
I mean, you're going to lose this one, though.
I'm not actually.
You're going to lose it.
You fundamentally have a problem. So MEPs are exercised at the moment about a second bag, whereas my passengers have no interest in a second bag. 50% of them will pay a premium to buy a second bag on board. We had a very good debate this morning with the two rapporteurs on passenger rights, whatever it is. They were shocked. I mean, they were stunned to learn that 90% of flight delays are caused by ATC. Who knew?
Kenton, I mean, some sanity to this.
In all of this debate about passenger rights, what passengers really want is an end to fucking flight delays caused...
Language, sir, language.
I'm Irish. An end to flight delays caused by fucking ATC short staffing. And that's where the problem lies. As I said this morning, we will agree to any reform of passenger right compensation if the Parliament fixes air traffic control. They won't fix air traffic control. They haven't addressed the issue, and nor will the Commission.
Please.
Well, I mean, on air traffic control, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's shocking, and you know, we now assume a really poor level of service, and then we just decide how much we're going to be let down even on that assumption. So, you know, it is really bad. It needs to be fixed. It's as Michael says, 90% of the delays, and I don't think we'll be talking about EU 261 if they fixed air traffic control. And it's such a simple thing to fix. You know, turn up at the start of your shift, man the first wave, and protect overflying. I think the second bag is just clearly a nonsense. I mean, I think we can only get, you know, for a large cabin bag, we have about room for 50% of the customers to bring them. 40% of our customers choose to travel for their advertised headline fare. They don't select a seat, maybe they don't bring a second bag. They would have to pay for the people who wanted the second bag. The people who wanted the second bag, they would get a crap service because 1 in 2 times they'd have to wait at a baggage belt for it to pick up, and that's not what they wanted. So I just think it's exactly the opposite of consumer choice. Those that want it can't guarantee it. Those that don't want it have to pay for it. It's a disaster. It's a stupid idea.
Can you kill it off?
I mean, let's hope so. I mean, it's such a bad idea. It's such a bad idea. And it's been thought out by people I assume haven't been on aircraft.
And it's one of the few things that I'm in total agreement with Michael on.
DTS and Schiphol.
I mean, even a legacy carrier like ours, the planes don't have enough space. It delays our departures. It doesn't make it. There's no benefit to doing this. And then same thing on the air traffic control issue and how that fits into EU 261. Like, fix the problem of air traffic control, and EU 261 won't be such a big deal.
I'm just downright depressed on air traffic control, and particularly single European skies.
Well, France is the absolute worst.
Because I've been chairing this for 10 years, and no progress. I mean, minimal progress on single European skies, and seemingly no change is going to happen, Carsten.
Let me raise the discussion a little bit. The heads of states are meeting down the road while we're here. What are governments for? Safety and security is number one. Infrastructure and education. Okay, education, at least in Europe, is in the hands of the countries, but the first two, safety and security and infrastructure, Europe and Brussels didn't take care of enough. So let's hope that the world becoming a more crazy place will focus also our regulators, our governments, our politicians to focus at least on those two, safety and security and infrastructure. Europe is behind on both, ATC being the example in aviation, and of course education is in the hands of the governments of the 27 countries. But that is, I think, what we need to keep telling our governments, regulators and leaders. Europe needs to get ahead on these two things.
Dear colleague in Portugal that's up on the blocks at the moment, TAP is for sale, and you're all in some shape or form working your way through whether or not, or if so, you want to go with it or buy it, or will you be allowed to? But how much more consolidation do you think there is to do in the industry in Europe at the moment? And then we'll take some questions.
I think quite a bit, and I can say that as someone who's the only one who's not interested in TAP.
Was anyone asking you?
Yes. TAP is next. And
Go on, you just want to shit back on somebody else.
perish the thought.
Go on, who's next then? Give us your opinion, who's going to go?
Who, after TAP?
Yeah.
The next obvious one is Wizz, who'll either go bust or be taken out before the end of this year.
I had Joe Varady on Questions Business last night. He spoke very highly of you.
As well he should. I speak very highly of myself on a regular basis.
No, I think consolidation is needed in Europe. If you see what happened in the States, is something that I think we need something similar here. I think it's a mistake not to allow consolidation, because then at the end we'll have a strong airline and we compete in a global world. And I think also it's something like a popular vision that consolidation at the end is bad for the customer. I think it's good for the customer. When you have big airlines, then you can offer better product, you can improve the level of investment, and that's what we have seen, for example, in IAG.
Right, but who else is there left?
Well, I think there are some...
Look, consolidation is happening, and we expect to see it happen. The three surrounding me are doing a good job of picking up some of the smaller carriers. I mean, we're happy when that happens and remedy slots become available, but I think consolidation is happening in the right direction.
You agree, Carsten? You don't?
Yeah, we need to stay on par with the large American players, with the large Asian players, Chinese players, and the latest, of course, acquisition from us, Italy would not be connected to the US anymore with Italian airplanes operated by the Italian airline if it wasn't part of something bigger. ITA would have had no chance against the three American players all going into Italy. Now with us behind them, I'm pretty sure they will survive connecting Italy from Italy to the world and at least to the US. So I think it is indeed increasing the choice for customers.
Do you think that it should be it should be a little clearer? If you were to ask people in Italy who owns ITA, would they know it was Lufthansa Group? If you were to ask who owns Aer Lingus, would they know? I mean, at least in the US, you can see the name of the big three that own the airlines. And I'm just wondering, but the national identities are also important.
What's more fun, to fly the three Americans or to fly Aer Lingus and ITA? Europe is great when it comes to these, what we have, the diversity we have, the European uniforms. We just saw that on stage, different foods. I think we want to keep, there's many things Europe is behind China and America. When it comes to those things, quality, taste, luxury, style, we are ahead. So on this one, we should keep our strength as Europeans, diversity, the history, the legacy of our various countries. Of course, in the background, buying fuel or buying airplanes, you don't want to have 10 airlines, you want to act as one.
Yeah, same for us. I think the individual national brands are a strength. The big former national brands in the US no longer exist, Pan Am or TWA. I think Air France, KLM, Lufthansa, Swiss, ITA, great representatives of these countries, and pushes out their cultures. So we want the synergies behind the scenes, but the brands themselves are actually a plus. But on the European side, if we talk about intra-Europe and consolidation, Europe is already a huge success story from an aviation perspective, much more so than the US. However, little by little do we have new regulations which risk setting us back. So ETS, first bag, EU 261, none of that is going to help customers enjoy all the fruits of a fantastic intra-Europe market. Now, long haul, for us, this is where I think consolidation is extremely important, because we need to be more competitive against the carriers outside of Europe. We've got all kinds of advantages, and we're seeing that Europe is too dependent, especially going eastbound. Now we're seeing it with this unfortunate situation in the Gulf, that they've got a major advantage and we have a major disadvantage to compete.
Which worries you more, the Gulf carriers, the big three US carriers, the Asian carriers?
I would say the Gulf carriers, by far.
Because of the location and the strength that they bring.
Well, there's hardly any market there.
Yeah.
So Europe and some other countries were gifting the European market to other regions that don't have the trade deals are terrible. We're seeing that today.
Can it be clawed back?
I think Carsten already answered. I think it's unrealistic to claw back bilateral agreements. It's unfortunate. I think what we should be able to do is at least new demands or requests for further further liberalization on some of these markets. I think there will be a second look that may not have been the case a couple of weeks ago.